Senator Van Hollen, Maryland's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you for your service and your testimony here today. Vice Chair Barr, I want to start with you on FedNow. I've been a big proponent of moving to a real-time payment system. As you know, our current lack of real-time payments costs millions of Americans billions of dollars, especially those living paycheck to paycheck. In fact, Aaron Klein over at Brookings did an estimate that said if the United States had implemented real-time payments when the Bank of England did back in 2007, Americans would have saved over $100 billion in overdraft, check cashing, and other fees. And those are mostly Americans living paycheck to paycheck. So I understand from a speech you gave a little while ago, you estimate that the FedNow program will be live in May or to July of next year. Are we fully on track with that? Because there have been lots of delays. Are we fully on track? And what share of Americans that bank do you think will then have access at that point in time to real-time payments?
Thank you, Senator Van Hollen, and thank you for the support of the FedNow program. I do think FedNow is going to significantly improve the ability of banks to offer real-time services to customers. FedNow obviously will sit as the backbone behind what community banks and others decide to offer. That will take some time to flow through the system. We're on track to do that launch in the May to July period, but it will take time to build the number of institutions that are well positioned to offer the kinds of services that FedNow will then allow them to do. So ramp up time is going to take a while.
All right. Well, we look forward to a very concerted campaign by the Fed to make sure that banks are aware of their ability to sign up and help them sign up. As you all know, there's a lot of volatility in the global economy these days. The Dodd-Frank legislation authorizes FSOC to designate a financial market utility as a systemically important financial institution, the SIFI. Back in May, Secretary Yellen expressed concerns about some of the guidance issued under former Treasury Secretary Mnuchin that she believed unnecessarily limited FSOC's authority in this area. Do you have concerns about the guidance, the 2019 guidance that was issued under the Trump administration? And do you believe that this should be revisited? Let me put it more bluntly. If Secretary Yellen asked to repeal the 2019 guidance, would you support that as members of the FSOC? Maybe start with.
Yes.
Yes.
Senator, yes, I would be supportive.
Yes.
Yes, I think it would be useful to revisit the guidance and to make sure that it's working, that, again, we're evolving with circumstances. We're taking the risks that might come in the system in the future into account, and it would be useful to do it for that reason.
I appreciate that because I share your concerns about that guidance. Now, much has been said about cyber currencies and the collapse of FSX, and a lot have called for regulation. I've been a proponent of some regulation in this area, but there are those who make the case that regulation would actually normalize an area where there's inherent risk and create potentially the false impression that investment in these areas is safer than warranted. So there's a threshold question about regulation here. I'd be interested very quickly in each of your ideas. Regulate, and that can be any form of regulation, or not regulate because that creates an impression that things may be safer than others by giving a federal government imprimatur.
Thank you for the question. So first and foremost, I have responsibility for the safety and soundness of the national banking system, so I'm always going to put that first. A lot depends on the devil. The devil's in the details. So a lot depends on the details of that regulation. I think there is a form of it which could perform its intended objective. I think there are going to be potentially forms that don't and that fall into the trap that you just laid out. So I think a lot really depends on what those details are.
Thank you.
Senator, I think in one way or another, regulation is going to have to be necessary for the activity. I think it's important to consider carefully how we approach that. talking about the crypto activity, almost all of it now is really investment and trading activity. So in the first instance, it seems to me it falls to the market regulators, the SEC and the CFTC. There is some interest, limited interest in the banking sector. And to the extent there is interest among banks, that will fall to us. As a general matter, I think we have authorities now to deal with the safety and soundness and consumer protection risks of bank engagement with crypto activities. I do think the stablecoin issue is a bit more complicated, and we do have existing authorities. That's an area where there may be a case for considering legislation, but I think more thought needs to be given there.
Thank you.
I'll agree with regulation is needed in this area. Sort of building on what the acting comptroller said, the devil's in the details. An important detail for me would be transparency. Having lived through the financial crisis of 2008, I really impressed upon me the need for better transparency in our financial markets.
Thank you.
I would similarly suggest that the market regulators are the sort of first place to start in this space. They have existing authorities. We want to make sure those are fully utilized. Some of the activity that was going on in this space was purporting to go on in a way that was designed to evade supervision and regulation. I think we've seen the enormous human costs of that kind of activity, the investors and consumers who are so badly hurt by the recent events in the crypto space. In the banking sphere, just to reiterate what Director Grunberg said, we do have the authorities we need in the banking space to get the job done in banking. And lastly, I do think there's quite an important need for developing a prudential framework for stablecoins with strong federal approval and supervision and regulation and enforcement.
Thank you. Thank you all.